Thank you, Chair. We've also received apologies from Councillor Whitehead this evening.
So moving to public participation, I don't see anybody.
Sorry, I don't see anybody in the wanting anything, so we'll move on to.
We couldn't get in through the front door if they were trying it.
No, we also have a note on the outside, really. So we move on to the approval of the minutes of the previous meeting, which are the third item on your agenda. So,
I would move that they were the correct record.
okay.
Second.
Right, so all those in favour? And that's unanimous, so we're good on that. And moving forward then, can I propose that we change the order of events somewhat and consider the work programme before we consider the, which is item 6, before we consider performance management. Would that, because I think we reach a stage in all of our committee meetings where we haven't actually carried any of the work programme forward because we haven't actually considered them in enough detail. And I think by bringing them forward, perhaps we can do that. So may I move that? Would there be a second of that? Okay, Nigel. So all those in favour? Okay, thank you. It's unanimous again. So moving on to interests. Members are required to declare the existence and nature of any interest they may have in subsequent agenda items in accordance with the Code of Conduct of the District Council. And those issues are matters relating to money that can be valued in money, affecting the member, their partner, extended family and close friends. Interests become apparent at a later stage may be declared at this time. Okay, nothing? All right, so can we go on to the scrutiny work programme on page 81 of your paperwork? Well, there is a page 81. It's right at the end. So you will see that there's there are 1, 2. Yeah. Right. So we've got 2 projects that are supposedly underway, but as you can see, there has been no real progress, with the last meeting of the enhanced staff recruitment and retention policies and practices taking place. That's marked as completed, so we can take that one off the list. Then there's the performance management, corporate plan and key performance indicators outturn, and that's in progress, and that, I guess, is the next item on our agenda. Yes, Laura.
In relation to the first item, where it says completed, has that actually been completed? Because I thought that was going to be taken forward, and that we would, unless it's gone to a committee that I wasn't sitting on, like GNR. Has there been a report on which of those retention measures, etc., are going to be put into effect?
I think it did go to GNR.
Did it?
Yeah, but there is further work that needs to be done, but I think that is going to be done under a governance committee structure rather than here.
If I may, I'm not sure if am I the only person here who goes to GNR? Okay, all right. I do know, and sometimes it's quite hard remembering what you've seen more than once and when you've passed it more than once and when it's been rubber stamped. I have a very, very strong recollection that since we met in, is it September to discuss this, that it has been formally approved as a package, and I think it must have been by GNR. Yeah, pretty sure about that.
Yeah, I know this is something we've dealt with, but in terms of recruitment and retention of staff, is it worth pointing out that, you know, since we've had these announcements in media about the likely reorganisation of councils and such like, doesn't that make the challenge even more difficult, given the fact that, you know, it worries me intensely that these type of announcements are made in public without any proper way forward, because, you know, if I was working for Derbyshire Dales District Council, I'd be very worried about my future when you've got politicians saying they're going to close councils down, and then we're talking about trying to retain staff. So how do we deal with that?
It's only white paper at the moment, so it's a long way to go before it's
Well, I hope so.
policy like, so
Yeah.
probably 6 months to over a year probably.
Can I come back on that? I was in a meeting this morning on Teams, and and the deadline for the county council to put in its proposal is by the 10th of January. The county council has to determine whether it wants to proceed to complete by 2027 or delay until later. So in fact the county council is having to think about this right now, and we in fact because we will probably want to feed into the county council's advice, also need to think about it right now. So Gareth, I think your question is actually quite timely.
And they're even talking about cancelling elections. I mean, are they talking about the general election or the council elections? Or what
They're talking about the county council election. So,
Yeah.
so there's one option, which is that the county council election is postponed for a year, and that would then delay the implementation of the change to a unitary authority. But the other option is to carry on as with 2020 election in 2025, by which time the schedule would be that the unitary authority came into existence in 2027
You know,
or thereabouts.
I'm a big fan of the democracy that district councils bring, and I've not really got a problem with the structure of district councils. I'm not an expert on county council, but, you know, I think we should be batting for ourselves and standing up for ourselves on this, and all our officers as well, because, you know, they're going to be really worried. So I think we need to have some sort of policy how to deal with this and actually stand up for ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, I echo exactly what Gareth is saying there. I would go so far as suggesting, I don't know if this is the right forum, this committee, it may not be, but certainly the leader of the council should be considering writing through the LGA to the government about precisely the mood music effect this has when we're struggling at the moment already before this to recruit to key positions. I think the government needs to know that this isn't the way to go about making this kind of decision.
Okay, I understand. I don't think this is the right forum for that, but I believe that Paul Wilson is already considering what actions to take in conjunction with the leader of the council and the other leaders of the PA. So that position is being developed at the moment. But as the white paper's only been out for a day, it's a bit difficult to say more.
Yeah, it's more than that, though, isn't it? It's a message about the way this kind of decision is taken in a very top-down, I would use the word threatening way, actually, and the messages, the subtle messages that must give to anyone. You look at the council's website at the moment. The first page is basically about advertising. Come and work for local government. This is probably the single most important way you could dissuade people from looking at a career in local government at the moment.
Understood. So I don't know how we can take this forward at this stage in this committee.
We could pass a motion tonight, couldn't we?
The point is when we have our own agenda, we can bring it into the work programme for ourselves for the scrutiny, because this is where it starts, isn't it? Looking into that. So maybe when we're thinking of future meetings, to actually look at this, because as I say, I don't want it to be seen as a fait accompli that district councils are going to be just discarded of, because I think they've got a great value and they should be supported and continued, and that's right across Derbyshire, because I don't know how they're going to replace that infrastructure in terms of democracy, etc. It's not going to be very easy, and I would never support it.
Sue.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with these, but obviously, like you say, at the moment it's not down on here for us to be put in place at the moment. But the one way we could do it is taking the status of complete for the enhancement and recruitment of staff, and take it and say, now to be further looked into, rather than it being a complete situation, to bring Paul Wilson back, to give us a bit more input onto how he feels he can progress, because obviously it was his report for recruiting of members of staff in every source. So it's our due now. We've got this chart in front of us and saying that's been done, and publication, and we're turning around and saying, well, it's all been complete. Well, maybe we could turn around and say, no, it isn't. We've got to, because of the circumstances that have come in about with change, it isn't complete, and we really need to keep it on our notes that we want to come back and readdress it, and possibly that would be the better way to show that we are interested, and it's stated that way, to get Paul to come back for his feelings of how he can progress on. I don't know.
The other and another. Yes, Peter. How are you?
Yes, thank you, sir. I do feel that we should keep going out and trying to recruit people, because even when whatever happens to the district council, it might go into a bigger combination. We don't really know yet, but we're not certain what's going to be the finish of it, really. So we should keep trying to recruit.
May I come back actually to disagree with Councillor Bull on this? I think I can never remember if it's Belbin's team roles. There's one of those management exercises which puts you into a category, and I used to always like to think of myself as a completer finisher. I don't think I actually was, but I think in a sense we have completed and finished that task. I'm confident that the council, through GNR and with the full council signing it off, has a raft of measures there which are the best we can do at the moment. As far as we're concerned as a committee, we have a programme of work here in front of us. It's so satisfying having ticked one of those things off. I think, yes, obviously the whole issue of staffing and recruitment and retention will come back again, but I just feel that we need to perhaps exercise our more laser-like focus on something else at the moment, and that is my feeling on that.
There is another issue, and that is will the input into the county council and the HCLG be monitored in any other way by councillors? If it's monitored through the governance and resources, which it could be, that's one thing. If it was through the governance working group, that's another. But scrutiny does allow us we can scrutinise our own decisions, and we can also scrutinise the decisions of those authorities that affect us. So this is this is the basis on which we are scrutinising the LLFA. So we might take that view that this is the measure that's being the white paper is something which is affecting us as a local authority, and therefore we wish to scrutinise that decision and the impact that it will have on the council as a separate task, a new task, and then we don't have to knock a completed task off the ballot. And it also allows us to a broader remit, because this is about staff recruitment and retention, which is one of the elements. But as Councillor G says, it's also about local democracy and one or two other things. So we might want to give some sort of recommendations about the sort of structure, if it goes ahead, the sort of structure that we would want to see. I don't know. So there's a issue about what scope that a project would have in those areas. But I think we've identified two good areas that it would cover.
Well, it'd concern me if, you know, in such a short time frame, the county are being asked to basically give an idea of their way forward, and we've got no say in it whatsoever. You know, it's worrying me a lot, and it just doesn't make any sense. I mean, what was it? Some date in January. I mean, you've got to put the goose in the oven before that, haven't you? So, I mean, we'll be cooked if you're not careful, and that's not good.
Okay, so would somebody like to make a proposal?
I think you've said it. I think if you could put some words around that we need to be part of this process, basically, and how you. I think we need to put some suggestion forward to Derbyshire County Council, because I don't want to have no input in our future as a district council.
I think there is something going in. There will be something going from us to the county council, and it'll be over a period of months. I mean, this is a decision about timing to start with, but subsequently it'll be a decision about the structure as well. So it'll be an ongoing requirement, and the issue is then how councillor input is made into that decision arises.
If I could just come back on that, this latest intervention by this new government, I mean, I've seen this developing over the last 12 years, basically 15 years, and it's never seemed to be something that is likely to come into place, but they seem to have some energy here to actually just put this into place no matter what now. So it's almost like they're going to deliver it, and they're in a rush to deliver it. So I think we need to be really careful and watch this, because I think they can see an opportunity, you know, with the combined authority and the fact that they're controlling it. You know, it's almost like they can actually push us down. So I'm actually more worried about it now than I've been in the past, because before I've sort of been able to take the view that, oh yeah, they're talking about it, it's been talked about a long time, but this seems to be more serious.
Yes, Peter.
Oh, sure.
I think we see this since the combined authorities have gone in, it's obvious that one tier of government will have to disappear. It's been obvious for quite a while, hasn't it, really? So I was hoping the county councils would disappear and the combined authorities would take over and we would left be put, but it seems like that they want to make a bigger area of district councils probably and make them answerable to the combined authorities rather than the county council. So I still see county councils in some difficulty, really. Yeah, but the combined authorities at Manchester and that have been a great success, so we'll see how it develops.
Okay, so Laura.
Perhaps what we could do is sort of table this forward to our next meeting to consider next time, because at the moment we're right at the beginning. We have no idea how this is going to play out in the next few weeks and months, and what county are going to say or do about it, and what impact it's going to have on everything else we do. So perhaps at our next meeting we should have an agenda item for a general discussion about whether we want to do anything in a structured way on this topic in the light of, I mean, it's a huge subject really, isn't it? Because it's not just about recruitment and retention, it also is going to affect any new contracts the council's going to enter into, like the waste contract and that sort of thing, and how we manage the leisure centres, all sorts of areas. Sorry?
Local plan.
Local plan.
Yes.
Yeah.
It'll affect all of those
Huge. So that might be something that this committee should get involved in, some sort of exercise of, in
I sort of feel we
looking into that.
I sort of feel we don't need to dwell on it further, but we could set up an exercise to scrutinise the advice being provided.
yes.
I'm concerned about the timescale. Obviously, it's already been alluded to that the county councils are the ones who are being officially consulted on this. I've just looked back at my emails, and although Paul Wilson has sent us several emails with links to the white paper, and there's a very feisty defence of district councils as predicted from the district councils network, with some very good arguments. I don't see anything, and I know we're only day 2 of this, I don't see anything here in terms of an urgency of response from the district council. The holiday period is very unfortunate here, but am I right in thinking this is in fact the only committee of the council which is now meeting officially between now and the new year? And if so, do we need to pass some sort of resolution, at least to ask the chief executive to consider consulting members quickly, so that we can put something together, if necessary, to send it through the county council?
Yeah,
Yeah, okay. So would you like to put that to it?
It's almost an emergency motion, isn't it?
Yeah.
Without over-dramatising things.
Well, it may be to put in to determine a way in which councillors can input into the decision for that is made. So, or the recommendations that come from the district council to into the county council and DHCLG.
I think that was a very almost neatly encapsulated form of wording there.
All right.
I think you need the word urgency in there as well. But, yeah.
Okay.
it's got to be an urgent meeting for the council to consider its sort of.
Well, as I said, I think this is something which is not going to be happen in a single. It won't be a single event. It'll be a process which will last some months, because it'll take a long time to work. It'll take some time to work out what the constitution of the unitary authority or authorities is going to be.
I was encouraged by what Peter said about district councils being the future, because that would be great, but that's not what I've seen in the press. I've just seen headlines saying district council is going to be abolished. You know, so somehow Peter's words not quite got out right. And if it's district councils, or if it's county councils are going to be abolished, why are they asking them for the way forward and not us? Because, you know, so somewhere there's a misstep in terms of the publicity of it.
Okay, so I would put forward a motion then that, along the lines of Rogers, that this scrutiny committee asks the chief executive and the leader of the council to determine a method of enabling council to be consulted on the recommendations made to the county council and DHCLG about the proposed unitary authority, and it should be something that will continue for the duration of the discussion between county and DHCLG. Something along those lines.
Yeah.
Have you got? Is that Laura? Lucy had. Did you manage to capture that? Okay. Right. Will that be all right, Kerry? If we do that? And can I also ask that in that staff are also consulted? Yeah.
Alright, so you're second, so Peter's seconding it.
Peter's seconding it. So all those in favour? Right, that's unanimous.
Well, that's quite exciting. That's quite an exciting
To do. Right, okay, so that's so we're going to keep the first one as completed. Performance management, well, that we do each time, so that will always be in progress. So we then move on to the third one, which is experience of flooding within Derbyshire Dales. Now, I think this has been picked up from a set of minutes that have not been approved, and I went through them before this meeting, and the scrutiny exercises concerning the LLFA's advice, not the experience of flooding within Derbyshire Dales, and there were terms of reference issued, and those terms of reference are not reflected in the minutes of the meeting that took place, although they are in the, I think they are in the agenda, in the papers now. So I think this item, the description is more or less okay in relation to the terms of reference, but there are. I think we need to get Barbara to look at this again, but my major concern here is that we haven't progressed it. So you can see the date of the meeting when it was last discussed, which was December 2023, and that was after a meeting that was held on the 19th of October 2023, where we actually agreed terms of reference, and it was Helen got us to consider a revised set of terms of reference on the 6th of December, and we adopted those revised terms of reference, which were marginally different from those in October, but nothing has been done since then. So we haven't got a team. We need to identify councillors who will participate in a team to undertake this review. Peter.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Helen did set a team up, didn't she, originally?
I thought
There
yes.
should be some names somewhere, because she asked me if I'd serve on it.
I couldn't find them in the minutes.
Yeah, but it never materialised.
Sorry, Chair. I think, obviously, I'm a bit blind to this because this is before I came back on to the council. But obviously, I presume you're discussing about Helen, of who's now left, the monitoring officer. So, and because we're in interim of monitoring officers, we haven't fully got one. I think that's probably where the problem lies initially, that anything's not carrying on and we've not got no more updates, and people haven't got together because of that situation, and that, you know, so does it have to be the monitoring officer that is involved with putting a group together? So maybe that might be something that we looked into. It could another officer be appointed to be, you know, the lead of a group of members of the council to do a working group to work on this, rather than it actually being the monitoring officer. That might be the way forward.
That's a good point, actually. Could Mike Hayes do this job?
I mean, Mike Hayes isn't here to defend himself, so yes, let's give that.
Gareth.
Could I suggest we could ask Kerry to do it, because she could be the future for the council. So I think she's got the right skills.
I've just found Helen's email of 25th of April inviting or trying to set up the first meeting, and that was addressed to you, me, Peter Slack and Dermot Murphy as the 4 members.
That's right, Dermot Murphy, yeah.
So we could continue with that, but choose a different officer, perhaps. And Dermot Murphy's not on this committee now, so we'd need to choose. Is he on the?
I don't know. Is he not on
No, he's not on the committee anymore. So we'd need to have another member.
there's one side on this side.
Good, thank you.
So we propose that we keep with the group that had preliminarily got together, but try and find an officer to lead it rather than being the monitoring officer.
I think that's a good point.
Probably Ashley Watts, really. He's involved with flooding all the time. So.
Well,
But I know he's a lot on Ashley as well.
I think this is a planning issue rather
You
than
think it's rather planning and
issue.
operational? Yeah.
Yes, and so it would either be a planning officer or
Yeah.
Mike Hayes, I think, who
Yeah.
would take on this role.
Could I just make one?
Yes, Darren.
Is Steve Wayne on this? Because
The-
isn't he a flood warden?
I asked Steve and Joe Linthwaite, who are both flood wardens, and they said that they would be preferred to provide the evidence rather than be on the committee,
Right. All right.
because they have a lot of evidence.
Yeah.
So where are we then?
Through you, Chair. Councillor G has kindly put himself forward to be the representative from the Conservatives in the group, along with Councillor Maelstrom, Councillor Slack and yourself.
Right.
You've also requested that we ask for a new officer lead in the absence of a permanent monitoring officer, so we'll go away and carry that out. That's what you've done, sir.
So we need a motion to. Do we need a motion, or do we just?
That should make a motion.
Right.
Can I just ask what the timescale is likely to be on this? The implication is that this may be the next piece of work in our work programme. However, it sounds like that may have just been trumped by the urgency of what we were discussing a minute ago. But I'm just trying to get a sense of the timescale we're looking at here.
The reason why we've put together a team is that there's a big body of work to be done here. Helen suggested that we devoted 2 whole days to evidence collecting, the public meeting, and or bringing in people who had evidence for them to talk to the group that was carrying out the scrutiny. There's also a requirement to understand the law associated with LLFAs. They have a number of roles, and we want to make sure, we need to assess whether they're actually fulfilling their roles under the respective laws. And then we'd also really need to talk to the LLFA themselves to get their view about what's going wrong and what's going right. And I think it's quite right to say here that they have enormous resource pressures. So given that they have a lot of decisions to make over the course of a month, and not very many people. So can I suggest that we put a timescale on the first meeting? So have a first meeting before the end of January. Would that be too long, or?
I mean, I wouldn't say it's too long, but it may well be that there's another scrutiny committee taking place fairly quickly relating to the issue of reorganisation. Are we able to? There isn't a maximum number of meetings we can have, is there?
I don't think so. This isn't the whole scrutiny committee.
Oh, the scrutiny committee wouldn't meet to discuss this then?
Just the working group.
Not yet.
Just
Okay.
the working group.
All right.
Try not to make it the 23rd of January, because I'm away that week.
Okay,
So all those in favour of Gareth joining the working group and having a us finding an officer and getting a meeting before the end of the end of January, but not in the week beginning the 23rd. So all those in favour? Right. Okay. Right. Unanimous.
good. Right, the next one is
Consultation and engagement process and overview of information systems. Now, do we have terms of reference for this yet? I fear that we don't, because I think we were tasked with producing terms of reference.
Through you, Chair, we did actually put together some terms of reference for this, and Helen had them. I mean, I can probably dig out what was in discussion between. I do come back to the point about focusing on the task at hand, though. And personally, I would whilst this is obviously important, I would prefer to see the issue of how we respond to likely reorganisation higher up the agenda than this.
That's all right.
Okay, we can put it higher up the agenda. But do you want to continue it though?
Yeah, but you may be looking at a different timescale.
Yeah, I must admit I've been quite happy with the way that the council has consulted on the various things. You know, I don't think it's a massive problem that the council has. I think it's got some good procedures in place. So, you know, as Roger's said, it's probably not top of the list, is it?
Okay. Yeah, yes, sir?
As I'm reading this, it's looking into the current arrangements about the consultation, and this is examining the consultation process as regards to the Ashbourne Air Quality Action Plan. And to be fair, I do know that there's a lot of people in Ashbourne that are still saying, well, you did all that, you put it down to say that there was an action plan supposed to be produced. Where is it and how is it progressing? Well, unfortunately, we're back down to square one, where we have to work with up the road, the county. So we're in a bit of a predicament in the sense that, as Mr. Shelley's just been saying, Councillor Shelley's been saying that, you know, the priority for them and us now is going to be, are we going to still be a council? And, you know, and how are we going to work along? So it needs to be in the programme, but I don't know whether we need to be saying that this is something that's got to be done. And it's got to be done in a way, because we've had this air quality action plan there for quite a while now. But I do remember when Tim Braun was on before he left, and before I'd finished in 2003, he said they can have these plans in place, but it'll take years and years to convey. But we have to show to people that it is still being looked into. But like I said, a lot of it is in the hands of the county, and they put it in place, and it's us that's got to see it through in a sense by putting out what has to be done. But 90% of the work is roadworks anyway, isn't it? So it's county. So, you know, maybe we haven't got the resources, we haven't got the staff, as we already know. So adding that on, any extra to making it important to that fact, is possibly keeping it on the programme. It needs to be there, but, you know, are there more important things to be doing beforehand? And it is working with county, like I said.
Yeah, thank you. We've got to carry on really soon with what our programme is, haven't we, really? If I know we've all these things, what happens if that happens, we don't know, do we? And we've got to carry on going on this programme, and I think we should do that.
Yeah, I appreciate that, but what I'm saying is, we have to wait till county have decided what they're doing and how they're doing the air quality situation. So they can't, you know, we can't run before we can walk, because we don't know what the next item, what they want to do to progress with that. So, you know, going out and looking at consultation, unless we just go over old work and say how they did what they did. You know, that's the only thing. But then I think we're just going over old road that we already know. There's something there, so it does. I can't see how it changes. It's just the fact that something needs to be done with it.
So are you saying that the consultation engagement went okay, but it's the delivery that is causing the problem?
I believe so, because we already got, you know, us going over and saying, you know, how did the consultation go on? Well, we've come to an agreement that there's an air quality action plan has been put in place. So we know from the consultation that that's what we've come. But it's now the process of getting that plan to work, and that's the thing that I think we should be more moving on, and not looking at how we consultated on it to come to the to come to knowing that we need an action plan done.
Peter?
Thank you. I understand what you're saying, Sue, but this is generally a flooding issue, isn't it, what we've...
No.
Well, no, air quality is part of it, has been air quality, but most of it's to do with information we could collect from all the flooding incidents, and we can carry on doing that work and bring all that work to fruition.
I think
Without,
Peter, this is a more general consultation on a review of how we do our consultation. This isn't only about flooding, this is about any consultation.
Yeah, but flooding is a big issue.
It is, but it's not. This is looking at we have a consultation process and a consultation policy, and this was I think it was to review the consultation policy and processes.
Yeah. Probably county will carry on the consultation with us. We're not certain about that.
I'm not trying to say that, Peter. What I'm trying to say is consultation, it's in here, the description, it's saying for us to scrutinise what we're doing in the programme, scrutinise how we consulted upon that particular thing. That's how I read it anyway. Am I just looking at it in, in a different way? But that's how I read it. The idea, the description of what we were supposed to be doing is looking at how we consultated and engaged with the public about the air quality. Well, we did. We've got an outcome, or it's the outcome that we need to get progressed, not looking back on how we consult upon it. I just think we're going round and round in houses on that one.
Does anybody have a contrary opinion?
I just, that's how I read it on here. Forgive me if I'm being a bit silly here. To consider the various systems used across the authority to deliver function and understand how greater connectivity can improve the customer experience. Well, I understand that, but if we're just looking at how we scrutinise that one particular thing, which has been put in there, then we're not gaining anything. We're just going over old ground.
Yes, Claire.
I believe that the reason that the air quality action plan was mentioned in the context of consultation was because it was seen as a really good example. So we thought if we actually want to review consultation across the council as a whole, that would be a really good one to look at, so we could learn why it was so successful and then try and redo that in other areas for other things. So I think the Ashbourne Air Quality Action Plan is mentioned just as an example of really good consultation, rather than it being something that should be followed up on its own, if that helps.
Well, if that's the case, then that's fine. We're looking at how we put questions out and how we consult with people. And obviously, if that was a good one, then let's just get the questions back out and say that's how we go about it. But like I said, at the end of the day, sometimes it's not the consultation side of it that it's the actions afterwards that isn't progressing.
That might be a conclusion of the study. So perhaps I'm not sure we have a task group, a working group to look at this particular issue. Would anybody, Gareth?
Just one final point, and I agree with Sue on this, but in terms of consultation, I think we do need to be careful, because I know this sort of, the whole word and the aspect of it can be used as it's a political toy, isn't it? We're consulting, we're giving you your say and all this type of thing, but the reality is you have to remember that every time you undertake one of these consultations, you're creating a massive body of work for officers that are already overworked. I mean, we did it with the local plan, where we had, I remember arguing against this additional layer of consultation right at the beginning, and that was about a year ago, where you're just bringing in consultation just for the consultation's sake, when you've got statutory consultation, and you're having to do the same thing twice. So I think you need to be really careful about using it just so you can put it in your leaflets when it comes to an election, that we always asking you what you want, because the reality is an election is where you're asking them what they want, and they want you or me, and that's it.
Okay, rather than debate it here and now, could we, Roger?
Just to say that I've got the draft terms of reference here that were sent to Helen Mitchell almost exactly this time last year. And yes, I think what's happened, again, it's a little bit like the flood one. The actual purpose has become a little bit muddied, perhaps, and that the air quality action plan consultation review, if you want to call it that, was just one example. So there was a series of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 action points as part of the terms of reference, which I won't go through now, but I can resend to somebody, I'm not quite sure who, to everybody here.
I think to Lucy, probably.
Yeah, okay, all right. And this was, this was just a first stab as well.
So can we consider this again at the next working group after we've seen the terms of reference, and then we can consider the terms of reference and assign people to undertake the work on this in this working group. Okay. All right. So moving on, there's one more, which is indirect discrimination. So scrutinising. The issue here is really we're not quite. There is a question about whether we consider indirect discrimination in the decisions that we make, and this scrutiny was really to consider how we're making decisions, and the criteria are associated with equalities and discrimination, and to make recommendations accordingly. So, any comments about timescales and bringing it forward? We're missing a team again, so we need a team.
Chair. Sorry.
Sorry. No, go on, carry on.
With all due respect, I'm slightly confused by this one. I have somebody correct me if I'm wrong here. I have a gut feeling that some of what is perhaps intended by this is in fact captured in the previous piece of work that we're talking about, namely the one to do with consultation and engagement. That's just my gut feeling. In other words, I don't know what we would do.
I don't think it is, because it's more to do with the our decision making. At the end of each report, we report on the impact on different groups as defined under the Inequalities Act, and whether we do that involving indirect as well as direct discrimination is the issue. So it's the decision-making process, not the consultation process, that we're considering here.
Then, in sense, by description of how you're doing it, it says we're looking at the council's policies and practices. So I think the first thing for us is the fact that all the policies for our equalities, discrimination and the likes that is already written up needs to be looked at and gone over. And that's the first issue right the way through, and then see what's missing to be added to it. So to me, that's the place we start, looking what policies we've got. And like we make decisions when it comes to our meetings after we've had all the reports written out by the professional officers that have already looked at these policies and said, they have considered X, Y, Z under policy whatever. So we take it as read. But how many of the policies, because I know I don't, and know all of them, and I presume 90% of the members won't know all of the policies. The policies are there on the website, it'll say that. But do we ever sit there and... So maybe that's the place to start first, getting the policies out, reading through them, and then seeing what we're missing to maybe relate to the indirect discrimination that we're making.
Thank
That's
you.
how I
Karen.
feel.
Just on the basis of the actual item, I mean, has this council got any examples of any complaints or this being brought to a head that it's got any indirect discrimination? I mean, is it something that's brought to, you know, when we have complaints
That's a
and
good
such like?
question. No, I don't believe we have had any.
No, I did look into this last year as Equalities Officer and checked with Deborah Heaton about our official record of complaints, and we went back about 3 or 4 years and there was nothing that was labelled or was classified as discriminatory, indirect or otherwise. And we reviewed a selection of them to see if maybe it was hidden within the sort of the body of the complaint. We didn't find anything over sort of 4 years. I think the only one that could potentially have come under was talking about the way that disabled toilets locked and unlocked, but it was quite a tricky one because it was a way of locking that worked for blind people but not necessarily well for physically handicapped people, so it was both disability compliant and then not disability compliant at the same time, so, and obviously a decision was made which way to go at the time on that. So
Thank you for that.
do you mind me adding some extra
Yes, please
information?
do.
So the way that we actually assess equalities, as Councillor Wills quite rightly said, is by looking at the equalities implications. We complete an equalities impact assessment which goes through what the likely impacts would be on people with protected characteristics under the Equality Act. What we tend to do is do them when there's a significant change or a new policy or procedure. So as things are moved and refreshed, then a new impact assessment would be done. So really, there shouldn't actually be any direct or indirect discrimination because we would be legally at fault if that was the case. So our position is that there is none. We have done the relevant equalities checks when bringing in new policies and procedures.
I think the only examples I can think of are to do with pavement width and the way in which pavements are considered in the local plan, and in allowing if pavements aren't wide enough for a pushchair, for example, is there then indirect discrimination with women because women are more likely to be pushing a pushchair than a man?
What would happen in that situation is that you would do the equalities impact assessment on that particular area. That would be noted as a negative impact on women, or you could also say underage that it would be a negative impact on children if they were unable to access certain areas because they needed to be in a pushchair. Equally, a wheelchair would be considered. So if we identify a negative impact in an equality impact assessment, we must add a mitigation. So that's how that's picked up. So if that's identified, then it is mitigated, and so they'd be asked to widen the pavement or make arrangements so that was dealt with.
And out of interest, does that apply to planning decisions as well as other decisions?
I would have to check that, I'm afraid, but I would imagine that if we found that kind of thing, then we would ask it to be changed. Yeah, I would have thought so.
So, Roger.
Thank you. I think part of my confusion about this is it may be the form of wording again here. So I read this initially, and the word legislation does crop up in the very last line there. But if you look at it more generally, it says to identify potential indirect discrimination within the council's policies and practices. I could take that to be a complete can of worms which goes much wider than legislation. Just to give you an example of this, without knowing all of the reasons for this taking place in the summer, one of our members decided to stand down from the council, and the number of reasons were possibly given, but it did strike me at the time that, and this came back recently in the last few weeks when we were asked to consult on the potential for remote meetings as a matter of course, it did strike me at the time that there was effectively, or we were potentially as an organisation, discriminating against a whole range of people who might want to put themselves forward as elected members. Now that's not actually spelt out here, but you could argue that the council's practices do act against the interests of a whole range of people who are not represented on the organisation. So I'm just using that as an example of where some people might regard us as discriminating, and that makes it a huge can of worms.
Okay. So there is a question here about whether we want to keep this on the programme or take it off or actually push it forward, or what the scope of it is.
I'd take it off. I think we've got enough to do.
I'm a bit concerned as to whether we are capable of doing this. I'm not sure I could read a council policy and spot the potential for indirect discrimination in it. It's quite a specialist area, and spotting direct discrimination is hard enough, but actually, thinking of issues like, pavement width can discriminate against women, as that sort of issue doesn't necessarily leap to mind. So without any sort of training on how to spot this, I don't think I would, even if I had the time, I don't think I would have the ability to scrutinise policies in this way.
So what is the mood of the meeting?
The only other point that I would probably make is the fact that us, when we become members, we aren't professionals in anything other than what we actually do. We're just lay people. We come in, we sit at the meetings, we're elected by the residents to be their voice and to try to give a defined decision on whatever the issues are. And that's why I said it's the officers that go through all these policies. But all that said, when I first came on the council, right at the beginning, we all had induction meet and we all had training on all of the data protection, scrutiny. We had the issue of all the, sexuality, equality and racism, harassment. It was all there. Now maybe that is the way we go on the elected members' side, to have some course on that, like for the members to understand, like we do with the GDPR, where you have the training, maybe do the training on the equality in policies, so that we understand what's written in it, but in a way that we can come in and just say, well, we're not going to read the whole policy, but the A, B and C of it is, they're the main things that we have to look at, and understand how the officers go through the policies that we've got to do the tick box exercise, for want of the better way of saying it, but that it is. I've seen, you have papers at the back of your reports, don't you? And it's a tick box. Has it passed such a thing? Has it passed that? Maybe going through that process and giving the elected members that training to see how it's processed that way, rather than doing a big in-depth. That might be possibly a way around it, so that we can all understand it, how it's come through. I just don't know whether you've had the training, because obviously I weren't here at the beginning, but I know they hadn't had planning training for a long while since I came back, until the other week, and that to me didn't really cover the bases, I didn't think, of what we were trying to achieve. So maybe we ought to go back to that of having training with the members, because at the end of the day, it's like in planning, you have all these policies, the MPPF, the local plan, the neighbourhood plans. We as members who sit on the committees of the planning, when somebody reads out it's policy HC11, do you know what that flipping policy means there and then? No. Are you going to sit and read them all because the NPPF is that big and the local plan is about that big? You're not going to read all that. But they're the things, and knowing how the process of the officers go through to identify these issues while putting a report together, I think would be more beneficial for us members than doing it the other way. But I don't know how anybody else feels.
I do agree with Sue. We did used to have lots of training previously. But at the end of the day, the officers are the professionals. And and we rely on the officers. How much training we have, we're not professionals. And we should consult the officers and rely on the officers more often. So,
Well, all that said then,
yeah.
if that's the case, then we as a scrutiny committee of elected members shouldn't be scrutinising our policies if we aren't the experts in the first place.
Okay.
But I think training of how it goes and how it's done would be
Sue,
the better way.
do you want to make a proposal that we take this off the agenda and off the work programme and ask for training in the detailed equalities assessment?
It's definitely within the work programme to provide equalities training to members. I think we did have an external consultant. I think from what you're saying, it probably would have been November 23. So it's certainly due. We do want to do it yearly, although whether that's financial year or calendar year. I might go to financial just to squeeze it in so we meet the deadline. But yeah, equalities training is definitely something that we want to provide to members and can certainly look to provide in refreshers and updates, in the appropriate format.
The better thing, rather than us scrutinising the policies that we aren't really professional in.
Okay, Sue, would you like to move that then? That we do that?
Could I just add? I think that's exactly right, Sue. Yes, with that emphasis that you made, that very good emphasis that we're not necessarily. It's not just a question of teaching us what the Equalities Act says. It's getting us to, and this applies to a whole other raft of areas within the council actually, about how the officers interpret that into their reports. That would be more beneficial to us, I think.
Okay, I think we've got to move. Laura.
Could I also suggest in doing this that we perhaps formally note the advice from Claire that each time policies come up for review or revision, that indirect discrimination is considered as part of that process.
Okay, Lucy, you've noted that in the minutes. Okay, so we have a mover and a seconder, Sue and Roger. Peter, did you want to talk again?
I'm going to second it.
I think, okay. All those in favour? Right, that's unanimous. Good.
Okay, thank you. Right, so thanks for the floor, bear with going through those first. I'm going to move on to the big item now, which is
The performance management, the corporate plan and outturn for quarters 1 and 2, 24-25. So the recommendations are that we note them. We note the outturn performance against the corporate plan targets for 2024-25. And we note the key performance indicators for 2024-25 outturn. And we note that the report continues to be presented to members of the Scrutiny Committee to highlight progress, demonstrate good performance and address areas for improvement, which I think means we'll continue to see this periodically.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Well, I don't think I actually need to introduce the report because the Chair's done a great job there. There was just a few points I wanted to note to you because we've adopted a slightly different way of measuring and rating the projects in the last 6 months. We're trying to move to a more project management approach for the corporate plan for projects particularly, where we're talking about projects meeting milestones and having actions that we can track over a number of months to try and just bring a more structured approach to looking at things that are quite long running, complex and very sometimes very broad ranging subjects and targets within the corporate plan. So I will just, I've got the wrong one on the screen, I actually want quarter two. We've looked at quarter one and quarter two, and then quarter two actually follows the projects through tracks where some have slipped off track, so they've actually started to take a turn for the worse, where many have actually come back on track. As it happens, we're closely coming to the end of quarter three, so we'll start to see how things have progressed in the last 3 months. But I think generally we're seeing a lot of successes, a lot of things that are moving nicely. Possibly as a scrutiny committee, it might be more appropriate to draw your attention to the KPIs that have not been achieved, because we are sadly seeing some movement on the planning KPIs. So this would be Appendix 3, and we're seeing quite a few that are starting to slip from the very, very high standards that we've previously seen. So things like planning applications decided on time and not decided on time, planning applications overturned on appeal, and that sort of thing has started to slip, unfortunately. So draw this to your attention because it's obviously something that if we can take action to address, then I'm sure you would wish to make some suggestions. Okay, thank you.
Would you like to go through 4.?
Would you like to go through the successes and the key projects that are off track? I mean, I know the key projects are off track. Several of those rely on external partners.
Yes, thank you. So off track at the end of quarter two, which was at the end of September, the Traveller Site Finding Commission reported that they had gone off track, although they were confident that they would bring a consultant's report in November 2024. So the scrutiny timescales obviously mean we're a little bit out of track. We will collect the data on quarter three when we come back after the new year in January, but you're more likely to see it through either the council, full council, than scrutiny because of the way the deadlines work. I think by the time we've collected the data and reported it, we've missed your meeting, so I might not be able to immediately give you an update on what happens, but hopefully where things are off track, like the Traveller Site Finding Commission, we ask them to demonstrate how they think they will get back on track and what we should watch for to make sure that that happens. The local plan was reported, and this had quite an impact on a number. I think there was another 4 associated projects, because there were changes to the National Policy Planning Framework on the 30th of July. This then threw out the timescales for a lot of the projects that were hanging on completion or that were working to the timescale for the national plan. So we saw a few delays there. Work on the Parks and Open Spaces strategy is due to start later this year. So again, hopefully we'll have a more positive update in quarter three. And then the car park review, phase 1, they actually had a very high response to their consultation, and it's in brackets as 1,947 responses, so that is quite a significant amount of data to work through, and it has taken longer than they expected to analyse that feedback. But there's quite a detailed comment there on the off-track box saying what the thoughts are as to how to progress that, which I won't read through because it's 2 full paragraphs. EV chargers in our car parks, with Derbyshire County Council. Again, they've put quite a lengthy update talking about why certain things have not gone as quickly as anticipated. So there's a lot of text there about it. But it does look like in quarter 3 we'll see some improvements. And then there are a couple where about the lobbying the Government Severn Trent and the Environment Agency to act on pollution is awaiting Helen's replacement, and Work with Platform Housing Group is awaiting the chance for the Director of Housing to arrange a meeting with their senior managers. I imagine it's been quite tricky to find a meeting time. And then underneath we have got a note that there are several getting back on track. Ashbourne Reborn, they believe they're now back on track for their timescales. Same with the Market Hall at Bakewell Road, and work on strategic development sites is all coming back on track. The solar farm, the restrictive covenant of land's been resolved, so that's ongoing. We are on track now to revise our economic plan and work to do the review and survey, which will then, I assume, feed into the new parks and open spaces strategy. That's now back on track, so that being back on track will then put the next one back on track. Okay.
Can I ask
Thank you.
how you determine what happens?
Can I ask how you determine something which comes back on track because terms of reference have been, or the proposals have been changed? So in the conversion of the former Market Hall, Bakewell Road, what is going to be done has changed significantly, and so we're not going to with the present piece of work, we're not going to get a cinema as we proposed originally. We're going to get a waiting room and some lighting and some external arrangements.
In terms of the rating, they're provided by the manager in charge who's providing the update. So if the timescales and so on have changed, then they're marking themselves as to whether they're on track to meet those new recommendations.
Okay, but they don't tell you that they've changed their terms of their target. That's an issue, isn't it? I think that's an issue that we might want to raise.
Well, moving forward for quarter 3, managers have highlighted and said that the problem with on track and off track is it's very black and white, and it's not giving a lot of room for explaining where things have perhaps are in the grey area. So from quarter 3 we will report on either on track with concerns, where managers can highlight that they feel they're on track but there are obviously these issues to highlight, or then off track, and we'll keep the definition of on track and off track as it is, which on track, the project is likely to meet its targets, achieve its outcomes, or it is not, needs further attention.
Okay, thank you. And then the key performance indicators.
Sorry, I hate using a gel pad. I didn't bring my mouse because it plugs in. I'm thinking actually I might just go straight to... Oh, well that would be helpful, thank you. Oh, in fact I've just got it on the microphone. I thought it'd be better electronically, but I'm thinking perhaps that was a mistake.
Oh, sorry,
18. Let me go back to my computer because I knew where I was. I did know where I was, I promise. So generally the KPIs are quite promising. We're still on track for things like invoices paid on time and sick days. We have a very good staff turnover rates and abandoned calls. As I said, it's when we start to look at the ones that have gone off track and are not achieved. The speed of resolution of incidents of reported street cleaning and of fly tipping, initially I think quite a high target was set. When we've actually had the data in and we've specifically analysed this, the results have come back as a little bit lower than expected. So The assumption was that we will be in the high 80s when the data came through, and it does still require checks because we're still working through how it's recording incidents reported on a Friday that are cleaned on a Saturday, because it doesn't pick up, the system doesn't pick data up on a Saturday, so they're then recorded as going over by 3 days when they've actually been cleaned the next day, which was within target. So we're working on that data, so those are showing as not achieved, and the planning ones, as I said, are showing some drops at the end of Q2. Would it be helpful for me to take your questions now, Councillor Maelstrom? I saw you with your hand up.
Thank you. Yes, it was just a quick one on those clean and green measures. The new KPI, speed of resolution of street cleaning and fly tipping. What is the measure? Is it 55% of what? It's not very clear.
So
is there a time limit?
55% of incidents completed and cleared within the agreed timescale.
But what is the timescale?
Is that not on the actual thing? Right.
It says exact details of measure TBC. Is that part of the
I think
problem?
that's because of the confusion about whether, say, as I said, an incident reported on a Friday, cleaned on a Saturday, does that count as next day or does that count as 3 days? So we are working, now that we've got 6 months data in, we've got data to go through and we've got data to work on to update the system. So.
Yeah. So is there going to be sort of a fixed time scale, so like a fixed target for fly tipping to be resolved within, say, 2 working days? Or is it flexible, saying as agreed with the person who's reported it?
I would have to double check the exact requirements with Sam Grisman, the manager, but yes, they have targets of certain days for certain incidents, but we've taken here a simplified version because there are quite a lot, like she did explain it in quite graphic detail. We need to clear dead deers from the highway within a day, but other things that are not dead and rotting can be left, which I'm sure she didn't quite mean to put it in that way. But there is a raft of different sort of standards to meet.
Weed control, I can't see anything about weed control. Does that come under, because there was lots and lots of complaints last spring in weed control.
I would have to check that. The way that it's done is it's through the CRM system. So when the customer rings up, they tell us what the problem is, and we have a number of categories, and it'll be assigned to that category. So I don't know if weeds would have their own category and we could report on it, or whether it would just come in generally as sort of littering, untidiness. So I would have to get back to you on that one. Sorry, Councillor.
I don't know if I could ask a few questions, if that's okay. I think you've got an unenviable job here, although it presumably means that you're across every different arm of the council, so it must be, in that sense, quite satisfying being able to drill down into the different things. I do take Councillor Maelstrom's point that we do need to be a little bit careful here that we're not simply marking our own homework or indeed having very, very loose parameters. And I've just got, I mean, I found it, for me, having been on the council 19 months, I found out more things that the council was actually doing, things I didn't know about, reading this than I would do normally, and it's given me a whole series of pointers that I now need to follow up with other officers. So incredibly valuable from that point of view. But I've got 1 or 2 general questions and then 1 or 2 specifics, if that's okay. Now, I know we introduced some new KPIs, so you can blame us for adding to your workload a bit there. And so I accept that, you know, some of the work in progress. There's a particular one which I'll come back to in a second. But I think with a lot of these things, particularly with the KPIs, I don't get a sense of the trend, the direction. It would be useful for us probably to see, much as the Appendix 4, so the thing that we have to provide for off log, not off lag. That's something to do with the second World War, isn't it? Off log. That shows things over time. I think it would be really helpful for us to be able to see how those KPIs are changing over time.
You
so
will
as
be
a future,
very excited in Q3 when we
Very
unveil
excited.
our new KPI dashboard giving
Excellent.
trends for the last 5 years, period on period, year on year,
well, I look forward to that.
and a full
Thank you.
a full kind of
All right.
yes, you are correct, councillor. It is very useful to see the trend year on year, and it is something that we've not used mainly because of space, because we're trying to convey a lot of information. But we have come up with a new, I should say Glenn Burton specifically, our digital transformation manager, has come up with a new Excel spreadsheet, much like the corporate project tracker, but very good way of visually showing you a wide range of indicators across the subject, and then
Okay.
the ability to drill down and get much more data. So yes, we will be able to show you that next
Okay.
quarter.
All right, that's good. If I could move on to some of my other questions. I mean, I think this is really valuable evidence, coming back to that very first discussion we were having about, you know, the future of the district council and what we do well or what we perhaps don't do quite so well. If you look at some of this, there's clear evidence in there. Starting from the back going forward, I've got an interesting question to me anyway, page 70, where you have, which one is it? The total core spending power per dwelling, which I'm not quite sure what that means, but if it is what I think it means, can you see where I'm looking? Page 70, everyone got that? Total core spending power per dwelling. Derbyshire Dales is £298.71 in 2023-24. And if you compare that with similar local authorities to us, we're ahead of that. Now, does that mean that we're we spend a lot more money on our residents than comparable districts, or does that mean that we don't look after it so well and waste it? Because that kind of statistic is really important for showing how effective we are as an organisation if we're to demonstrate our worth or the worth of the kind of way we operate in future.
I am really sorry, this one is way out of my expertise.
Okay.
I don't do the finance ones.
It's spending power rather than spending, isn't it?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that could be just
It
the
could
money
be.
we've got, which is sitting in reserves.
Yeah, it comes back. I mean, it does come back to that. So, okay, I won't press you on that one. I've got one or two others. So, Laura asked the question that I was going to ask about the two new KPIs, 13 and 14. I notice so part of this again, there's an issue here about this, how this is presented, which might be tackled in future, because you read the first section, which is the first quarter, and then you read the second section. In many ways, Appendix 3 is more useful because that summarises them first. So if you read it that way round, it might help us, might help me anyway. But what it did mean was that I was noticing things like grant funding for businesses, which crops up on page 17 and 55, appeared to be down this year. Now, again, these are detailed policy areas. I don't know why that would necessarily be the case, whether you might be able to answer that or whether these are questions we need to put to other people.
I'll be happy to pass that one on. I think that's probably best for the grants section to answer, yeah.
Okay.
I think in general terms, we're looking at the structure of this and the reporting, rather than because I think most of the answers, most of the detail will be will go to a particular officer who provides that information. So
Okay.
I think we're looking at this as a demonstration of our performance overall, and is there anything we want to say about that?
That's fine. I'll shut up then. Yeah.
Okay. Maybe you can take the questions with the individual officers.
It's really useful from that point of view because it does give us that way into departments and teams that we might otherwise miss. So thank you.
Is that Mr. Capes, is it, who deals with grant funding for businesses?
Got you, Mike.
Oh, sorry, yeah. I think because I went to that presentation, the business thing, and I was quite impressed actually with it. And it just might be, but as you say, it's not really relevant to this. But I was impressed with the way that it's being dealt with. There was some good.
Was there as
trends,
well,
isn't it?
Gareth, and it's a take-up though, isn't it, really? There were a lot of people here, but how many's taking it up? You know, we don't know that, do we?
Okay.
Yeah, from what you've just said, obviously we're not here to criticise and ask the questions like you said they're going to come to. But I think for what we need to note, in the sense that a lot of this is literally all around planning and ground force work to me, and I would have said it's all the situation of resources that we've got that have implicated why we've got to this situation. That's how I feel. And so obviously the very first thing that we were talking about keeping and retaining staff and recruiting, that's got to be our main priority.
Roger.
Yeah, there is one other point that I agree that the sort of the black and white thing, it's a bit like Ofsted, isn't it? Isn't helpful, and it may even be that you want to put in by way of explanation things that are outside of the control of view of officers, and I'm painfully aware. I'll just cite last week's planning meeting, for example, where some of the things I noticed we've got a sort of a red mark against us in terms of appeals against the council. I mean, some of that is because of the decisions that we as members are taking. So we need to have I mean, I'm sure that will come back to roost in some shape or form, but it needs to be shown where the responsibility for some of those decisions lies.
And I'd also just like to say I really like Appendix 4. I don't think we've had that sort of graphic before, and I think it's really valuable to be able to see how we track against the rest of Derbyshire and national. It was really interesting. It took me a while to work out what was going on, but once I got my head around what it meant, yeah, it's really interesting.
I'll be honest, I hate it because they're so out of date, they make my teeth itch. Some of them are like 21, 22. So we've done like 8 quarters since then. I just think, oh, come on, if you're going to be national, get your acting gear. But Councillor Maelstrom has made an excellent point, which is about the use of benchmarking. And this is something that has been raised as well, that it's very useful for us to see, not just our own performance, but also where we stand in comparison. So we are looking how we can integrate that into the performance reporting more and show more comparisons. I think it might come through in the KPI dashboard, I'm not sure, but it's certainly, if not, then we will be highlighting it in reports and appendices so you can see where we stand if there is a national indicator and a national benchmark.
Can I just say how I appreciate the structure of this report, because it starts off with an explanation of the terms. It then goes in at a very high level and gives us the plus points and minus points, and then we can drill down to appendices if we want to see the detail, and the detail's all there. But it's all there in a form that we don't have to spend words reading whole paragraphs. It's there in easily identifiable and process chunks. So congratulations on producing a really easy to use report, and perhaps one that should be taken as a model for how reports are produced.
Thank you.
Put Appendix 3 at the front next time.
I'll write that down. Well, if I can kind of go a bit further, it was actually Helen Mitchell who suggested that we should try and link our performance much more strongly to our finances and try and present the two together so that you could see not only the financial decision but what it affected in real time. And this Appendix 1 and 2 you may have seen from the organisational update. So again, it was her suggestion that we actually incorporate performance information directly into that, so it goes to members. There's a little bit of an unforeseen consequences, which that I think members nearly got all of our performance information before corporate leadership team because of the timescales, which they weren't too impressed with. But yeah, we are working to bring all these factors in and try and improve not just our performance, but the way that we are managing it and the way that we're reporting it. So it's useful to managers, it's useful to members, it's useful to this committee, who are then the other step of scrutiny as well. So yeah, all feedback is welcome, because we do take it on board and try to adapt and move on as we go. So thank you.
Where does this report go now?
Well, this is it for quarter one and quarter two. It's filed. Quarter three will be next. I have been told not to let it go out in the organisational update until managers have seen it, or CLT. So you might get quarter two again in the organisational update, but once we've done quarter three, that will be circulated to corporate leadership team. Don't think it'll go to council, because we tend not to put them through until the end of the year, when there'll be a summary of the corporate plan.
Can I suggest that we need to send it to council, because we're getting lots of remarks about not knowing how we're progressing on the corporate plan, and from individual members. So I think it needs to go, and this is particularly PA members probably, because the PA, a lot of what's in the corporate plan came from PA members, and they're interested in what their particular bits, but want to overcome an issue, a potential issue that the council hasn't changed. But it has changed, and you can demonstrate that it has changed, but there is some perception that it's not taking consideration of what members have said in the corporate plan, but you're quite clearly demonstrating that it has done so. So I think it's well worth putting that out to all members.
I don't think I can agree to take it to council or not. I think that's not a decision at my level. I'm looking at Kerry to leap in here.
Yeah, I mean, decisions go to committees and full council, so there's no actual decision. What you're talking about is like an informative,
Yes.
so maybe that's done via a different, a different method. But yeah, I think it is important that councillors are all alerted to the, where we are succeeding, and not so. So yeah, I do agree.
I'd just push back a little bit against that, because I agree that members need to be informed, but you don't need to just tickle them at full council just to make them happy, do you? So we don't need to bring it to full council, so it's unnecessary.
I think we do need to inform them, but I'd sooner, you're saying we've got K3 coming. I think more beneficial that we go on what here and now and what we've just progressed with, instead of 1 and 2, because then you can see more permanent, what's the point. That happened last year, if you will. To me, it's the here and now. So once you've got the details in for the quarter, maybe we put that and say, well, could we have the reports put out, whether it be online rather than going to a committee, because it's just information. Once it's been seen by the heads who have to see it, then agree to it being once it's published, and let's have it out there. It doesn't have to be at a meeting, and we can have it online so that all members can view it if they want to look through it and read it. If they've got questions, then that's the time to put it through, rather than it going to a meeting to be scrutinised that way around. I think that would be.
Well, it already is online, because it's published as part of the agenda for tonight, isn't it? So all we need to do is send a link to it to the full council, saying, by the way, here's the latest stats. If you're in,
But
if you're not bothering to
I think
check the agenda of the scrutiny committee every time we meet, here it is.
A little bit more easier to find, shall we say, because a lot of people don't go looking for lots of things.
No, exactly.
And
so
it's not just
on
for,
email, can't
it's
it,
not
for anybody?
just for the members at the end of the day. When it's out there, it helps show the public what we're spending as money on, and what we're achieving and what we're not achieving, and that's their argument, because we do a service to the public.
It's certainly something that we're looking at taking forward. There is a performance management section on the website. It tends to be just kept up to date yearly, but it's certainly something that we can look at loading the performance reports up as soon as they've been approved, so they're more widely available. The only thing to mention is that before this year, we only ever reported on the on the corporate plan 6 monthly. So this quarterly reporting that you're seeing in terms of projects, that is a very new thing. And we are aware of the impact on our colleagues of asking them to report on essentially 98 projects every single quarter. It's quite a big ask. So if the feedback at the end of the year from managers is that actually it's too onerous, then we may well go back to 6 monthly reporting in the corporate plan, which I think is what is actually which was agreed by council when the corporate plan was actually put in place, when it was agreed. You probably know the date better than me, I can't remember. So some of this stuff is being reviewed, is being monitored, and the best way forward is being considered, taking into account people's feedback, and that includes feedback from staff who are actually doing the work as well as members who are obviously enjoying getting the information. So bear with us, I suppose.
Does that
Thank
take
you.
more time off from the staff, obviously?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so,
And in actual fact, we've got 236 projects in total.
yeah.
I think about 81 are completed, 98 are corporate plan, and the rest are just general ongoing work.
Yeah.
So we've tried to do full reports on all projects that are in progress, and that was done at the 6 monthly mark, and that was quite an ask for managers.
Is the stuff up to full strength or?
Well, it's just needing to actually kind of gather the information, put it in the right format so that it's understandable to any reader, and update that, type that into the reporting mechanism. So it can be quite an onerous task just to do.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so we have a proposal that it is uploaded into the performance management area of the website, and I assume that that would then be notified to all councillors and staff, and I think that's probably all we would need to do at this stage. The issue is whether we do it quarterly or every 6 months. I myself would prefer quarterly if the resources are available, but quite understand it. So can I propose that we go ahead and upload this into the performance management area of the website now, or after Q3 comes out?
Well, I can put this stuff up because, as councillors quite rightly said, it's already been made public information.
So probably put this one up and then do another one either at Q3 or Q4.
Yeah. I would need to get manager approval at CLT level before we start making these things available, because there might be something that has commercial sensitivity or reputational sensitivity. So I won't agree to that as yet. These have obviously all been approved and are already in the public domain, so that's fine. I think that's a process perhaps that we need to bottom out before we agree to anything for quarter 3 and quarter 4.
I think we're not in a position to make decisions. We're only in a position to recommend in any case. I think our recommendation would be along those lines. Does that mean? Yeah, okay, all right.
David, could I just suggest that perhaps we just, as a sort of a Q2 mid-year update, just circulate this report to the council members now?
Well, I think that would make sense. Yeah. All those in favour of doing that, and noting the 3 recommendations in the report. Okay. That's unanimous again.